So, welcome to today's episode of Health University, where I have the pleasure of introducing my friend and colleague, Dr. Tricia Pingel. And Dr. Pingel is known as the Adrenal Whisperer. And adrenals, as we know, are very important to consider when a person is trying to conceive or going through any advanced reproductive therapies. She's a leading naturopathic physician. I got that mixed up. And she specializes in stress and cortisol management. Once again, cortisol and any hormone down the chain, it needs to be addressed, spoken to, understood, and healed and mitigated. So, Dr. Tricia, shall I call you Dr. Tricia, Dr. Pingel, Tricia?
Whatever you'd like to call me. It is fine.
Dr. Tricia, I would like to say she's empowered so many women in helping to identify and transform their experience from being wired and tired, which we know is that adrenal fatigue, typical kind of presentation, to finding themselves in a state of calm and connected. And that's what we ultimately need if we want to have our own health, our fertile health, our relationship health, and so forth. She's been featured on many TV shows and has in publications such as Mind, Body, Green and Prevention Magazine. And she is a visionary CEO shaping the future of holistic medicine. She's also a best-selling author, and I'm going to invite her to explain her book a little bit because I think it is integral to this conversation. So welcome, Dr. Tricia. Thank you for joining us today.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Certainly. So do tell us a little bit about your book. I want to pick that up and fast forward it because I think that people we'll put it in the show notes, listeners, so that you can have access to it. But tell us about the book, what, stimulated you to write it, who might think about what they want to read in it and why.
Yeah, thank you. So this is Total Health Turnaround. It is available on my website. It's also available on Amazon. And what's funny? I was approached to write a book just kind of on adrenals. And I said, I don't want to write a book. I don't know how to write a book. I don't know what to talk about. And they said, well, what's interesting? Why do you choose adrenal health? And I sat down and I had a napkin and I was at a coffee shop and I had a pen and a napkin. And I started drawing the physiology of what the adrenals control, and it turned out they control your heart, they control your gut, they control your hormones, they control your mood, they control your sleep-wake cycles. I started looking at all of the top medications that are used in our country, all of the top concerns of people, and found that cortisol has a direct and indirect impact on every major system in our body. And I thought, there's a book here because nobody talks about this. And when I first released the book, it was in 2014. So at that time, saying the word adrenal, everyone went, what are you talking about, lady? And so, but it's a great resource for learning more about how cortisol impacts you and also what symptoms show up because of it that might be being missed or treated as something else. The thyroid is a big area. Perimenopause, infertility, menopause, all these things, we're given these labels for, I'll call them more situations sometimes than like a disease per se. And that's very frustrating when you're the patient and you're like, I don't feel well, or I'm having trouble with this. And there's no diagnosis. It's like, oh yeah, it's just stress. You'll have to find ways to deal with this. I really wanted the public to understand how it works so that they could arm themselves with the information and go to physicians and say, look, we have to start paying attention to this. And how can this improve my symptoms? So that's kind of where it bred from. And I still, to this day, reference this book all of the time because there's so much amazing research in it. And infertility is an area that I wish I would have written a whole chapter on in this book, maybe the next one.
The next one, exactly, the next one. And it's interesting because, back in 2014, we had a love affair with stress. If we were stressed, then we were productive. That was the impression that we got. And especially as females or as people with ovaries and uterus, trying to do it all and then feeling as though we couldn't share if we couldn't get it all done, and then hiding kind of with some shame when we weren't feeling well, when we weren't feeling completely, ourselves. And then, of course, as you say, getting a diagnosis for which there's always a prescription for a diagnosis, which is oftentimes a Band-Aid. So this is a perfect conversation to have because, as I say, the fertility challenge, the infertility experience now is affecting 1 in 5 people in the US. And so clearly there's something going on, much of which I believe, and I think that you would agree, can be reversed. I don't think that we actually have infertility per se. I think we have subfertility based upon our environment, our lifestyle, or the conditions around us. So tell us, how let's get sciencey, let's get a little nerdy. How would you say cortisol affects fertility?
Well, let's start with something just to understand the concept of it. We have external stress and we have internal stress. And I think this is a really important concept because whenever I approach people and I say, how's your stress? The primary answer I get is, oh, I mean, I don't have anything to be stressed over. My life is great. I have a good job. I have this and that and this. It's expected. It's normal. It's what I'm supposed to be going through right now. There's nothing I can do. And I mean, I think a lot of us can identify finances, relationship, even the stress of not being able to get pregnant, things that are very tangible. I think we all recognize as external stress. But I think what we really need to understand is those external stressors in turn cause internal stressors. Right. So even when that stress goes away, let's say, you had a money issue and now it's over, the inside of your body has adapted to that stress. And now that's caused a different stress. And so we have to look at stress holistically and realize, no, we're never going to get rid of it, right? It's always going to be out there. There's always this stuff that's going to be going on, but we can control how we respond to it. And we can replenish our body from the effects of it. And I think when we start doing that, we start to see a lot of symptoms disappear. And I agree with you when it comes to fertility. Over the years, I've had numerous clients that had been through rounds of IVF or they were really struggling to get pregnant. And when we really looked at the adrenal profile, they conceived. There's a couple little Pingel conceived babies. And I'm so proud to say that because either they redid the IVF and it worked because they were now signaling progesterone correctly and things like that, or they didn't need it, which is really cool. So yeah, I think to get a little bit nerdy, as you said, cortisol is released from our adrenal glands and it's released anytime there's a stimulus. So if you could imagine taking a hike and there's a bear, you're walking along, doing your thing, looking at the flowers, and there's a bear. All of a sudden, your heart rate goes up. Your eyes focus on the bear. Your brain forgets where you are. All it worries about is running. And we're built to handle that. We're built to handle it really well by changing our blood sugar, down regulating digestion, our gut, our hormone production, everything that we do in our day-to-day cellular repair down regulates so that we can run from that bear.
Right.
And that's fine if we get away from the bear. Right. But with these external stressors, as we just discussed, and potential internal stressors, there's just a bear and bear. So everywhere you turn, there's a bear.
Being late for the next Zoom meeting is a bear.
Oh my gosh.
Running in, hitting another red light or being cut off in traffic is a bear.
This thing right here, this cell phone, every time it bangs, every time it texts, every time. So here's what's interesting and what I have found, and particularly in women, although I'm not going to say it doesn't happen in men, but what I found with technology is we're getting more and more anticipatory of the next bear. So let's say we get away from that bear, we decide, let's take a nap. You sit behind a tree, you have some water, you're thinking, oh, I'm going to doze off. And then immediately your brain goes, wait, there was a bear. Where's the next bear? When's the next bear coming? How long do I have before the next bear comes? And you start thinking about everything that's going to happen that hasn't happened.
Exactly.
And our cell phones kind of contribute to that. So we are in general as a society, and definitely as women, and definitely since the pandemic, we are definitely on a heightened alert. There is a bear at every single corner. So what happens is our body stays in that fight or flight, run from the bear mode, and doesn't go back to rest and digest. So we start, our hormones aren't working like they should. We're not detoxifying. We're not absorbing nutrients. We're not, managing cellular repair. Our immune system's in disarray. And all of those nutrients that we need to help manage those symptoms are also directly impacted by cortisol being released. So we get external stress and internal stress into what I call a little stress hamster wheel that we literally can't get out of. Right? Or we feel, I should say this.
I was going to say,
that we can't.
I'm going to say, okay,
we feel like we can't, right? We feel like we have no control over it.
Right.
And we do. Anyone listening out there, you absolutely have control over it. And it's not as simple as just saying, oh, well, you just need to deal with it, or you just need to go get counseling, which, by the way, drives me insane. Don't even get me started on that. But there are ways to deal with it. And yes, it takes practice, and it takes a mindset shift away from everyone needing you all the time. You know who needs you the most? You
Your
need
own
you
heart,
the most.
your own lungs,
Your
your own
soul.
regulatory system.
You have to reconnect with you. And until you reconnect with you, you can't connect with anyone else. And I think we really need to come back to that idea that we are serving too many people at once, I think most of the time. And we want all these things because we know we can achieve it. But sometimes we do just have to sit back and really listen and learn how to work with our body so it can provide the hormones needed to ovulate.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so obviously we can't necessarily shift out of that mindset when we're on the hamster wheel. So there are disciplines, shall we say, that are wise to put into place before the next ping on our phone or the next Zoom meeting or the next whatever is going to inevitably come. As you say, we can't change the external stressors, but what advice do you give to listeners that they might put in place so that when those external stressors come, as they will, they are better fortified to deal with it?
Yeah, I look at this from 4 different aspects: nutrition, exercise, supplement, mindset. You have to do all 4. You can't just do one and get it. You only get so far, right? So one of the things to consider, and we can go into more detail of this as we go along, but the nutrition required to replenish what cortisol is burning is very, very important. And a lot of those same nutrients that are burned through cortisol are 100% involved in the hormone pathways, and estrogen and progesterone and testosterone and all of these things that are required for fertility, thyroid. The exercise is looking at exercise from a calming state. So walking, for example, is a great exercise. If you don't have the earbuds in your ear.
Of course, please, no earbuds in your ear.
Listening to nature, feeling the ground, breathing, listening to the birds, communicating, exchanging, saying hello to people. I can't tell you how much stress reduction comes from just saying hello to strangers.
Yes.
So many people underestimate that, especially we're all afraid to talk to people now. I don't know why.
Making eye contact.
Oh,
yeah.
And you know, my kids, I watch my kids on these cell phones trying to talk to people. And I'm like, have you thought about just picking up the phone and calling them? How about we invite them over, right? Just eye contact with a stranger in line at a grocery store, walking past them on your morning walk, saying, good morning, you know, things like that. I know it seems so trivial, but when you put those things into practice, they start to reconnect you with others and yourself. And when you start to feel that reconnection, you're calmer.
Exactly.
And when you're calmer,
feel safer.
Your body can do it right. So exercise needs to play into that. It's not going to Orange Theory and pushing yourself to oblivion. It's doing things like walking, stretching, yoga, Pilates, strength training, and doing it in a mind that's restorative to the body rather than angry at the body.
Right.
Do you know what I mean by that?
Absolutely.
Like as women, and I'm still guilty of it. I could wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and be like, oh, I look heavy today, or I look tired today, or my hair, you know, oh, I have a gray hair. Like we're so quick to judge ourselves and put ourselves down. And here's the thing is our body was built amazingly well to do a lot of things for us. And you are where you are right now because you're meant to be in the spot. What you do tomorrow is up to you. You can't really do anything about the past, but you can change tomorrow. And right now you're learning a lesson and you're present in the moment. And that's what it is, right? So I think really looking at going into when you do exercise, not exercising to get that weight off, even though that might be your goal, that's cool, but not focusing on that, but focusing on how does your body feel when it moves? What is it trying to tell you when it moves? How can you be present in the moment? Adding just that layer alone makes a huge difference in adrenal response.
Absolutely.
Supplement is working with the physician or working with someone that can help supplements with being depleted, the minerals, the B vitamins, and we can talk a little bit if we have time about more specific B vitamins here, because I think there's a huge role of fertility there, but B vitamins, you know, selenium, zinc, magnesium, all of these things that are depleted immediately from stress, and the mindset in general. Every single day of our life is a blessing. And, you know, I think so often we take that for granted. And, you know, I've lost my immediate family there. I mean, my husband and kids are here, but my parents, everyone I grew up with, they were all gone, and they died when I was quite young, right in the height of their lives of vibrancy. And I think from that, though, you know, you go through the grief of it, but when you go through grief and you address it, you also realize how precious every single moment is. And so really being grateful for that, even the bad stuff,
Yeah,
even the
I
struggle.
actually say grief is the flip side of the coin of love. We don't love, we don't grieve for that which we don't love. And so and so grief is actually a very sacred experience that our society has put a lid on. You know, when someone feels grief stricken, we're told, well, you know, don't show those emotions. Here, take some Lexapro. When if they could just have this sacred experience, that grief would dissipate, if you will, the energy, because it's energy, would dissipate into the next regenerative cycle.
I
So,
love that. And I
yeah,
love that for infertility too, because that's grief. I mean,
absolutely.
it's loss often, you
Mhm,
know, with
mhm.
miscarriages and attempting and putting your
And
whole
just the
heart
first
into
drop of
something.
menstrual blood, right? So it didn't
Yeah.
happen this month. So you have your period. However, by day 2 of your period is the next generative cycle. So I mean, it is happening whether we appreciate it or not. So when we can appreciate it, then it happens with that much more amplification, and we don't have to go down this hole of grief. We can really express our grief as a human act.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
this is a lot of why we have so much health decline in our country. I
Yes.
really do. You know, it's
Mhm.
like I talk to so many people who say, I don't get it, Dr. Pingel. I eat right, I exercise, I take my supplements, I've hit a plateau, I'm not getting what I want, blah, blah, blah. And we have to have a really deep dive into what are your intentions? What's your mindset? Where
Mhm.
are you rewarding yourself for these experiences you're going through? Are you learning from them? Are you growing from them? Because that's really all we can do. My life would be really boring if none of this horrible, seemingly horrible stuff had happened. And I don't think I would be here, honestly, helping,
Mm.
you know, thousands of people getting well if I didn't take that opportunity and say, okay, there are others going through this exact same thing, and I'm
Right.
seeing it impact every single aspect of their health. And we need to get out there and we need to start coming together and we need to start reconnecting and talking about it
Mhm.
because it's okay to feel
Mhm.
grief
Absolutely.
and
And I want
sad.
to go back, if I can, for just a second about exercise, because here again, culture, marketing actually has turned the word exercise into a task, a
Mhm.
something to do, when really the goal, if you will, if that's even the proper word to use in this sense, is circulation, because blood flow is going to be what restores our tissues, what helps with the detoxification, methylation, regeneration of our cells and our tissues and our organs, and so in ourselves, all of us. So rather than see exercise as something I need to tick off the to-do list, because that mindset, as you say, is the very thing that almost makes the exercise not even worthwhile. Whereas the appreciation for, oh, I get to circulate my blood in this hour, or or taking this dog for a walk and taking in the sunlight, the whole experience, just you can hear it in my voice, it has a very different internal experience, which changes the whole physiology, changes all the hormones, including the expression of cortisol. Now, I do want to take a minute and hear your opinion on this, because all gets a bad rap. We hear, oh, cortisol. Well, we need cortisol. We just don't need cortisol rampant and into perpetuity. So tell us, if you will, like, what are some of the benefits of cortisol? Like, why do we need it?
Well, I mean, to save your life. I mean, that's it. I mean, you know, acute cortisol is fantastic. If you only see one bear, you're going to get away from that bear. You're going to, you know, you're going to divert everything to save your life. But it's the chronic stimulation. Everything's life threatening now, right? The ring of the phone. Oh my gosh, it's a bear. Oh my gosh, it's a bear. When you get chronically, the body will actually adapt to that by changing your insulin levels. Okay, so we got a lot of trouble with insulin. It does start to change the menstrual cycle. There's tons of documentation on that as far as women who have, you know, like lack of menstruation or very infrequent menstruation have higher levels of serum cortisol. But in the interim, you need that, right?
Yeah.
You need to stop the period to run from the bear. So it's
Right.
okay, right?
Right.
But if that's continuous,
Yeah.
that becomes a problem.
Exactly.
So there are
Exactly.
some beautiful, I mean, cortisol, you'll
Helps
see
us wake up in the morning.
it helps us. Well, I was going to say the sleep wake cycles are one of the
Mhm.
most important aspects. You know, it's supposed to be highest in the morning when you wake up, about 30 minutes after you wake up. And then it's supposed to gradually and slowly decrease down. And then it puts you to sleep and you have nice, restful sleep. And then ideally, the sun comes up and you wake up, right?
Mhm.
I find that people fall into three different stages. They're either in stage one, where their cortisol is high all the time. And I
Mhm.
call this the superwoman stage. I
Mhm.
just admit it. We've all been there. We do everything all the time, and everyone's like,
Mhm.
wow. You are incredible. How do you run this family and do this and work and do all this? And you're like, not good, you're not tired, you're doing fine. And then we start to go into a stage 2, which is where I find most people live, which I call the roller coaster phase, which is so unpredictable. And this is where I think a lot of the infertility starts to come in too, because you're going to see changes like this. So maybe menstrual cycle may be changing. You may have energy one day. You may sleep some nights, not other nights. You may be tired some days, not other days. You may think it's hormonal.
Right.
Because
It's just
variable.
PMS.
Yeah. And this can go on for years on end. And that's what I find. Stage 3 is typically where cortisol is just not, DHE and cortisol are just low. They're just not putting out anymore. So many people incorrectly believe they're in stage 3 just because maybe they had one low cortisol reading and they're like, oh, I'm bottomed out. No, it's a fluctuation, right? If you're truly with no cortisol, that's actually very few people. Most people are going like this and in an unpredictable pattern, and it's causing a multitude of symptoms of adaptation and the body trying to fight between the adaptation of fight or flight and its natural ability of rest and digest. These two nervous systems are now fighting with each other.
Yeah.
And we're getting angry about it. And we're getting really frustrated about it.
And we're raising our cortisol as well.
And then we're just fueling it, we're just fueling that situation. And so that's why that 4th piece of mindset is so important, because we have to realize, okay, we're in the middle of something right now, and this is not fun. It's hard. And that's okay. Like,
it is okay. And for the listening audience, who are in this case are groups who are trying to conceive, one's ability to say, oh, you know what? I'm going to mother myself through this. I'm going to give myself proper nutrition and hydration and circulation and sleep-wake cycle restoration. That is so empowering. And it really does change the physiology all the way down to the level of the follicles, because when we're in constant stress, we see that the follicular fluid inside of which that egg is being grown can either be healthy with nutrients, or it can have inflammatory markers in it. And I found that to be fascinating when an REI showed me that. I thought, wow. So sometimes we can't do for ourselves what we can do for others. We've been trained. So maybe start by practicing saying, I'm going to do this for my desired baby. And I'm going to start taking care of myself so that those eggs have the best nutrient-rich environment in which to grow.
And another point on that is something to consider is because I had a friend she was in her 20s and she was going through IVF, mostly because what they thought was progesterone issues, right? That she was creating the egg, but she wasn't holding the pregnancies. And one of the things that's really important to remember about cortisol, especially if you're someone that is doing progesterone injections or doing hormone injections, is that cortisol and progesterone are friends. They support each other, unfortunately. So when you're running from that bear and you're running and you're worrying and you're stressing and you're putting in exogenous progesterone, cortisol is going to take it. So it's not as effective. So even, you're going through all this time and energy to put these hormones in, it's really important for you to work on all of the things you just mentioned to keep the body calm so that it can actually utilize what you're putting in. Because the body, when it's under stress, it will store. It will send it somewhere else or to store it. It's kind of like a freeway. It's like if you had a bunch of cars on a freeway and all of a sudden cortisol said, oh, this exit is closed. Now the body's got to figure out, wait, I got to take. So it's going to start pulling from other things and creating reroutes and trying to figure out how to get there. And that results in a lot of symptoms and problems not on your anticipated destination. So it is really important because there's such a close interplay, not only between cortisol and egg development, but also in holding the pregnancy.
Right.
So it's really important to focus on that. And I would encourage people that if you're having that struggle, to really just kind of step back, and mother yourself. Because the body does miraculous things when you do that. So I highly support that. And just understanding that connection between the hormones and cortisol. It's not doing you any favors to worry about it, unfortunately. Exactly. So we have to trust it.
Exactly. Trust it. And then almost supersede it by saying, okay, I'm in my 2-week wait. Nobody knows. You could have the most perfect embryo and the most perfect uterine lining, and life will life itself. And so there really is this, again, natural act as living creatures on this planet of engaging 100% and then surrendering 100% and trusting and hoping and then using that time frame to engage with all of the things that prove that life is in your favor. friends, family, a sunshiny day, a happy dog, whatever these things are, look for those signs. And I will go so far as, if I may, just back up 1 second to talk about the progesterone, because exogenous progesterone is helpful. It can be helpful. However, that corpus luteum, under the optimal conditions, ought to be producing enough progesterone. And if it's not producing enough progesterone, it begs the question, why? We got to back up a little bit and say, so then therefore, likely in this egg development inside this follicle, the follicle of which turns into the corpus luteum, I possibly didn't have all the tools lined up on my behalf. So we can Band-Aid it. Progesterone is wonderful to help support, if that's all that's needed. If the embryo can make it and start to borrow in, that's great. But don't presume that, I'll just take some cortisol and it's one and done, because of the reasons I just described. Thank you for listening to this episode of Health University. We always strive to find ways to improve our support of you. Please connect with us for a fertility assessment call at the link below, healthuniversity.co, note not .com, /your-fertile-health-call. We'd love to learn a bit about you and share our resources. Now, let's resume our conversation in today's episode.
Exactly. And I think it's important to look at it from a holistic, because half the women that I've seen that have conceived afterwards stopped progesterone. They started producing their own because they addressed the cortisol issue. They said, no, you can't divert on that freeway. You got to stay on this freeway. We're not going this direction. Let's block this way and not this way. And I think it's important to remember that the body works like, it's a chemical reaction. A plus B, there's an arrow to C. There's a lot of different ways that C can be impacted. Maybe you have low A, maybe you have low B, maybe you have too high of one or too low of the other. But over that arrow, there's a ton of things, lots of nutrition, lots of minerals, lots of things to consider. Even when I look at thyroid, people say, well, my thyroid's normal, but they think it's tied. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Let's look over that arrow. You may have plenty of T4, but why is T3 low then? Well, is it selenium? Is it zinc? Is it too much estrogen? Is the flora? You have all these things that
Is it antibodies?
There's all these things that are just working together in so many different ways. And it's important to look at it as a whole pathway and as a conveyor belt, right? So even when you're replenishing that nutrition and people say, well, Dr. Pingel, what do I need to do this? I think, okay, well, let's look at serotonin. What's required to make serotonin? Magnesium, B6, right? Vitamin C. What's required to manage hormones? Magnesium, B6, vitamin C. What's required to, help with the thyroid? You've got zinc in there, selenium, magnesium. So all these things in the entire endocrine system require the same cofactors. So do you want to know what cortisol depletes directly? Vitamin C, B6, magnesium, B12.
I'm hearing
B5.
a pattern.
So when you're running from that bear, it's like you're just throwing those things out the window, right? So how can we expect our body to make thyroid, make progesterone, make an egg, do what it needs to do if there's a huge piece of the conveyor belt missing, right? And they all impact each other. And unfortunately, when those pieces are missing, it impacts our mood and it impacts our sleep. And when it impacts those, we get more frustrated and we have more problems that develop. And so just back
that impacts our relationship and our performance and our, our productivity.
So your internal stressors, your external stressors created internal stressors, which gave you more external stressors, right? And I know that can sound overwhelming and you're probably thinking, well, geez, Dr. Pingel, great, there's stress everywhere. But the point is, it really isn't that complicated. It's more so just taking a moment to really take assessment, work with a provider that understands that, to give your body what it needs to help you on whatever this journey is. And the journey is like an onion. It's like you have an onion and you have all these layers and you kind of just have to start peeling a layer off at a time. And at some point you're going to run out of layers. And that's where you're like, the body's like, yay. I
can function.
You're not, there's all, and it's, sometimes it's quick, sometimes it takes longer, but at any rate, there's wins all the way along the way. There's growth along the way.
Exactly. And so that people don't feel sort of on their heels around this, it is not that one has to complete, peeling every layer of onion. You can get pregnant and have a healthy pregnancy, with just a few peels of the onion layer taken care of, but continue with the nutrition, hydration, circulation, sleep wake cycle restoration, so that the pregnancy continues, so that the healing continues, so that baby can continue to get all of the things that it needs.
And so you can get through the postpartum period
Postpartum,
effectively,
for
because
sure. So you can
it's
feed that
hard,
baby. Yep. It's just the beginning.
And I think you need to
Mhm.
take care of yourself to take care of them. And so
Absolutely.
either way, even if it hasn't happened yet, look at it. Okay, I'm building my mom tools here. I'm building
Exactly.
my body to be able to be what I want to do when this happens. And
Mhm.
it's not as complex, even though I may make it sound that way. It's not. I think it's just really the first step is saying, okay, I'm going to take back control over this. I'm not going to I mean, I don't want to say the word control, because you are relinquishing control, but a control to your body to dictate,
Mhm.
work with, and stop trying
Mhm.
to control the outcome and work more on changing the.
Yeah, I like to use the term empowerment. We empower ourselves
On.
so that we can, again, engage 100% and then surrender 100%. We have to have an exhale to get our next inhale. There is not control per se, but there is engagement. We can be the CEO of our own health. We can, every day that we open our eyes, we can have a moment of gratitude, like, oh, I got to wake up today. Oh, it's a sunny day or a cloudy day. Either could be equally as much of a gift. It is all a gift. Now, you mentioned B vitamins earlier, and I know that obviously we know B vitamins are important in the stress pathway in liver, methylation and detoxification. What would you like to say more so that the listeners can say, oh, I need to make sure I have, for instance, a conversation I always have, the right supplementation, because they'll come in with buckets of supplementation, and half of which are doing a disservice, the other half of which are really not quality. So they're making expensive urine. So please, if you wouldn't mind sharing with us your experience.
Well, I think, first of all, anytime, and you've probably discussed this, I assume, but anytime that someone is having infertility issues or any hormone issue or any mood issue, I absolutely get checked for the MTHFR mutation,
Correct.
which is a mutation that has a problem with methylation. In particular, involves folate, B6, B12. It really impacts detoxification pathways. So even outside of just the folate piece of that, which obviously goes into developing a healthy baby, just the not being able to detoxify and methylate things and get things out of the body causes a lot of estrogen dominance, can cause a lot of luteal phase defects. So a lot of other things that contribute to fertility. So number one, check that. Now, what's great though about B vitamins is you don't even necessarily have to check that to treat it, but you can take B vitamins that are already methylated that basically bypass that pathway. And
I
so
find that, sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted. Oh, I was just going to say, I find that when patients come into my clinic and their doc has decided that, they don't want to or don't need to test for the MTHFR gene mutation, I'll just say, then let's presume that it's mutated. Let's behave as though. Same with antibodies. Let's behave as though. The solution, the resolution is not hard. As you say, we are a complex system. We're not that complicated, however. So there are things that we can do, like taking a methylated B vitamin complex, like being gluten-free when we're trying to conceive, because we know that is the biggest trigger for an antibody cascade. So, again, work with a professional, but know that you don't have to spend a fortune on the tests, or if your doctor, decides not to, and you don't want to, do a cash pay type of testing, just behave as though, and work with a professional who knows how to behave as though.
Exactly. And I think the other thing, ditch the prenatal that has folic acid in it. Like folic acid is not going to work if you have that mutation. And there's so many women who are, well, I take folic acid, and that we're not talking about folic acid. Folic acid has to be converted into metatetrahydrofolate. And so you want to make sure that whatever you're taking has that form of B vitamins, methylcobalamin instead of cyanocobalamin, really looking at a blend of really just methylated B vitamins and a really good mineral that's bound together with absorbable ligands. So anytime that we take a zinc, for example, what it's bound with matters. If it's bound with oxide, doesn't absorb as well. So if you walk into your local pharmacy and you see oxate or sulfate, ditch it, throw it over the shoulder, throw it at the pharmacist, whatever you got to do, get rid of it, and go and find one that is, bound with picolinate, or, I mean, sometimes you can get away with citrate. It's not my favorite. I like glycinate. cholinate, orotate, malate, like depending on what it is, and really make sure that you're getting the benefit of that. I will say from an adrenal perspective, if you find something bound with glycinate, like magnesium glycinate, you're going to have a little bit of a relaxing type effect of it as well. And that can be really helpful on the stress side to kind of just help relax the body and sleep. So there's a lot of benefits that you can have from a supplement that it's kind of more bang for your buck versus taking like a magnesium sulfate. It's not going to give you magnesium, and it's also going to make you go to the bathroom all day. So you're going to lose everything else that you have. So I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do that cover a lot of different areas. And anyone educated in this type of supplementation, functional medicine doctors, naturopathic doctors, integrative MDs, people that have studied that will absolutely know this. So you don't have to be alone on that. And if it's helpful to your audience, my website has a ton of free blogs on this too. How to pick a good multivitamin. I have an article about NTHF and B vitamins, how to reduce stress with certain types of nutrients and such. So is a good jumping off point to discuss with your.
Beautiful. And all of, and your website will be in the show notes so that people can access it and comb through and see, what it is that they would like to learn from, because you're absolutely right. I'm always putting people on the, a magnesium glycinate, especially when I can see what we call them, the liver cheese stagnant person whose shoulders are attached to their ears. You can just see the skeletal muscles are just, they're so tight. I will put someone on a citrate if her complaint is simply, I'm constipated. I'm like, great. Let's help you poop then, but just until you get things moving again, and then we shift back over. So yeah.
Absolutely.
And then what about nutrition in terms, do you have a kind of a standard recommendation for how people think about food and what is sort of first on the plate?
I love the way you say how people think about food, because that's exactly how I look at it. There's so many people out there saying, go keto, go paleo, go vegan, go this, go. It's not about that. Here's the way I like to look at it. Every time you put something in your mouth, ask what you're getting out of it and know your body. What does it need? If it needs more magnesium, nuts and seeds would be a great addition to it, right? Because you can eat more of those, you can get more magnesium. So every time you put something in your mouth, what are you getting from it? So I tend to find if you want a really good nutrient profile, particularly if there's cortisol issues, there needs to be a lot of variety of plants on your plate, a lot of variety. This is my feeling. I don't know how you feel about it.
Oh, no. You're singing my song. Okay. I will always say, deconstruct your meal on a plate. Half that plate needs to be the widest variety of color, flavor, texture of vegetables that are low carb that you can consume.
Exactly. And, and then look at nuts, look at seeds. If you're going to do grains, I always recommend gluten-free. The ones that you can get the most bang out of your buck from, quinoa is a great one. Millet is one of my favorites. And so many people don't cook with millet, and I love millet. I love it more than crunch. And a lot of people think brown rice. In a pinch, I do brown rice, but there are so many other wonderful grains out there that are so flavorful to cook. As far as meat goes, I don't personally eat meat the same, but this is where I find people differ. What's your activity level? That's a huge factor into how much protein are we needing to eat? What types of protein do we need to eat? How do you feel after you eat certain types of proteins? For me, when I would eat meat back in the day, I would get stomach aches and really feel run down, and it didn't work for me. And when I switched to doing a plant-based diet, I had amazing energy. I have clients who are completely the opposite.
Yeah, I'm the opposite. I could practically be carnivore, and so maybe it is genetics, maybe it is sort of the way our bodies were built over time. But yes, so there isn't a one right way.
It's just about getting, are you getting, whatever your protein source is, are you getting the nutrients out of it? Are you extracting it? Do you have enough hydrochloric acid to break it down and absorb it? Are you getting energy from it? And I think that's really important. And when you say genetically, possibly genetic, may also be microbiome related. I mean,
Bingo.
there's
Thank you. Yes.
On how certain bugs in our gut crave certain nutrients. And they've done tons of studies on this, even in obesity, the microbiome of people who crave carbohydrates all the time versus the microbiome of people who crave protein all the time, and the differences in that. And the more that you eat of something, the more you change your microbiome. So it could also be that, and that's okay. It's really about the nutrition and making sure that you're providing the body what it needs on that conveyor belt, whatever your conveyor belt may be, whatever your product may be. And by the way, we only really make one product out of our body, and that's energy.
Yes.
And that energy fuels everything else we want to make. So if you don't have the energy, if your conveyor belt is broken, there's no way we can expect our body to make anything beyond that. So back up, go back to the conveyor belt. How do we make energy? We need nutrients. We need exercise. We need, supplementation in the areas that are broken on the conveyor belt. And we need to have a good mindset about it, that it takes time to move through that conveyor belt. And that's okay, because we're rebuilding, we're laying the tracks
Exactly.
to be able to build whatever we want to build, right?
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
so going back to those basics, may I touch on something on
Yes,
exercise?
please.
I want to say, as you know, I'm sure, I'm a dancer. That's what I do.
Oh,
And
is the hip hop queen, the hip hop
Yeah.
doc.
so I dance hip hop with teenagers 3 times a week, and I dance around the house all the time. And that's just what I do. And I love it. And it was funny because when I was younger, I was a dancer, and I was on a dance team and a captain of a dance team. And that's how I relieve stress. I listen to music. My dad was a musician. He played guitar. Every morning I woke up, I heard him in the kitchen playing guitar. Whenever our family gatherings got together, we sang, we danced, we did all this thing. And when my parents passed and my grandparents passed and all of that, and I found myself without music, there was no music. Like I wake up in the morning, there's nothing there. The parties were not there anymore. It was like someone turned off my music button, right? And long story short, took me through a lot of adrenal fatigue, a lot of real just beating myself up, a lot of depression, a lot of grief, a lot of who am I? How can I possibly go on? I don't have the music. My music is missing. That's the only way I can explain it.
Yeah.
And didn't want to go to the gym, didn't want to walk, had no interest in doing exercise, right? And one day I woke up and I was like, you know what? One, I know I need to exercise. I have 2 young kids. I don't want to die. I don't want to die like my parents died. I don't want to go that route. I want to live my life. I need to exercise. How the heck can I do that? And how can I also bring joy to my soul? And I had this thought. I said, I need to bring back the music. So I went to a dance class, and all the girls in there were 13, 14. And I just showed up and I said, well, I'm here to dance. And they were like, okay, well, you're in a class with a bunch of teenagers. Are you okay with that? I said, I don't care. I'm just going to commit to myself. I'm going to show up and I'm going to do something that I love to do. And I've been doing it ever since. So it's been 10 years. I've been back in hip hop classes, started with 1 class a week with the teenagers, couldn't put a piece of choreography together, couldn't remember more than an 8 count, was fumbling over everything. And fast forward 10 years later, I learn all the recital routines with them. I've grown up with these girls. I watched them grow. There's like so much joy that I've found from just finding the music again. So my point is, when we're talking about exercise and you think, oh, I hate going to the gym. So do I. Hate it. Literally, like you'd have to pay me a lot of money to go to the gym every day, right? Not my thing, but dance is my thing. I found the thing that I connected with when I was a kid. So I would ask you, if you're having trouble committing to something, whether it's diet, whether it's exercise, whether it's mindset, what innately did you love to do on a creative aspect when you were younger?
Yeah.
When my mom was dying of cancer, she was painting because she just loved to paint. And she was like, if anything, I'll have all this artwork. And I have artwork all over my house from her because she was painting, but she found her joy in that. So go back and think, what did I do when I was 5, when I was bored? And what can I bring that back into my life? Because what was interesting when I did that was how my health shifted. The adrenal fatigue started to repair, my gut started working better. My energy is through the roof. I find joy in it. I can spread joy with it.
Bingo.
When I see you and I get to meet with you, I can dance with you, and I can share that love and that energy and that community. So find that joy by going back to how you were as a kid. We get so caught up in our adult lives and we forget that we were actually fun once.
Yeah, I agree. And that it's just so funny. I usually say 11, not 5. I go to what I think is just the pre-menarche time frame, because that's usually when we're full of ourselves before we become identified as, oh, now you're a menstruating person. So anytime from in your awareness, like, what did you love to do? Because you knew who you were back then.
100%. Yeah. And you can trust your body more when you start to know who you are. And I think we lose trust, right? We lose trust in our body, especially when we feel like it fails us.
Yeah.
Which is so common in so many different health conditions, when you're trying to do everything right, and it isn't you
trying that actually, if you're trying to do everything right, it's the trying that is the thing you need to take out. You need, do what you love to do, because innately. So stop trying, stop shoulding, as they say.
Yeah, and just start doing things and see. And so I don't know. I hope that inspires some of you listening
I'm
to
sure
kind of
it
go back and
will.
say, you know what, I can do it. Because I could have quit.
Mm,
I mean, and trust me, there were days I went there and they did this hard. I'm in an advanced hip class. Advanced hip up class, I should
mhm.
add. Like, and what's funny is since doing that and doing it so often, they saw my joy. And I said, you guys should have an adult class. And they said, oh, no one will sign up for it. I said, yes, they will. Let's just get out there. Let's talk about it. And they signed up. And now there's an adult class. And so I do the advanced class and then I do the adult class.
I
And
love it.
just keep showing up for yourself.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Tricia, I want to be respectful of your time and the listening audience's time. I know that you and I could go on for hours because I'm really, rejuvenated just from the conversation. I do know that there is an anxiety course that you wanted to mention, that I wanted for you to mention, so that listeners could consider taking it. And again, I'll put it in the show notes, but would you speak to that?
Yeah, I've noticed so much, especially since the pandemic, just generalized
Mhm,
overall,
mhm,
this bear that just follows you around all the
mhm,
time. And the one thing that really has kind of lit me up is that there's really not any options out there outside of here, takes your Lexapro, or hey, just deal with it. It's
mhm,
stress, or here's counseling. And I think in order to guide people on just small little daily routines, 30 days of what can you say to yourself every morning? What can you journal every day to really start to dig into your heart and start this process of relaxation? I created a 30-day DI program, and it's called Total Anxiety Turnaround, 30 Days to Calm and Connected. And
beautiful.
it's just a few minutes a day, journaling exercises, tips, just reminders, little
Mhm,
things to just kind of start to look at. I include in there a lot of resources to take to your doctor as far as labs to consider and things like that as well. So you can
mhm.
take it to the next level. And I just started offering this. I don't believe it's on my website yet. It will be. We'll definitely put it in the show notes. And you can
Okay.
always DM me on Instagram, Facebook. You can reach out to my office and they can fill you in on it. We're happy to help you get started on it. And I'd really love feedback on it as well, on how it helps everyone just kind of
Yeah.
take back,
Yeah.
that calm yourself down, and just kind
Yeah,
of give you
that's
little tips
beautiful.
throughout the
That's
day.
beautiful. And it's interesting because, when we talk about the four pillars, usually it's the mindset that it can be a little tricky. Like, how do I get in there to make that change? Because we're patterned. And it's
Mhm.
like, how do I find a break in that pattern to begin to make the change? So something like this, 30 days it is DIY, but then you're also in community, and
Oh,
it's supported. So
yeah.
definitely, if that's the place where you went, oh, mindset, if I hear that one more time, this would be a really great way to playfully and like joyfully begin the process. So,
Yeah, it's like learning that dance routine I couldn't
mhm,
get in the beginning. You keep showing up and you reprogram your body and you just keep doing it over and over again. And that's what these are, little tips just to start reprogramming that and break that cycle of negativity and of the internal stress that you might be
yeah,
holding.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, I cannot thank you enough. And listeners, I hope and trust that you got so much out of this. It's been a wealth of tidbits and information and encouragement. So thank you very much, Dr. Tricia, for joining us today and providing such amazing information. And listeners, I will say, as I do at the end of each session at Health University, class is dismissed.